Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, here at the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and for those of you that are watching online, we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we bring Kurt up here for his presentation today, we have a couple of housekeeping items, so I'm going to turn it over actually right now to Jackie Bolt to discuss the 10,000 Small Businesses Program. So with that, Jackie.
Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm here to just give a very brief little introduction about the 10,000 Small Businesses Program. There's a handout at your seat, and I did leave a few extras in my cards in the back as I do have to leave after this. But the 10,000 Small Businesses Program, if you're not familiar, is a new program to the state of Iowa. It is actually a nationwide program that is funded by Goldman Sachs Foundation and is in partnership with Babson College. Babson College is the #1 entrepreneurial school, and they helped create the curriculum and what we have come up with is, or what they came up with, excuse me, is about a 12-week program for small business owners. The program is designed to really give small business owners a plan and opportunity and information on how to grow their business. So it's a little bit different than a lot of programs you see in the state in that it is not meant for entrepreneurs. So it is not meant if you're interested in starting a business, but yet you have a business, it's growing, or you'd like it to grow, and kind of what's the next step. The program came to Iowa a year ago. We successfully ran 2 cohorts, and we had 73 graduates from around the state, a couple of which are in this room. So you will have to pick their brain if you are curious and have some questions. So the program, the individuals that went through the program spent a very, I will say, intense 12 weeks working together through different modules of curriculum. You come to DMAC 3 different times, and the remaining times the curriculum is provided actually online. So there's a couple different ways that it is offered. And at the end, the goal is that you create a growth opportunity for your organization. So you run through all of the modules of curriculum, you work with your growth group, you have a business advisor, and I would say it is one of the strongest small business programs that I have seen in a while, and the best part is that it is completely free. So because it is a partnership through the foundation, the Goldman Sachs Foundation, they really take care of everything. So even to come to Des Moines and stay, that is all covered as well. So really you have to commit to getting to Des Moines, and you have to commit to the time. There definitely is a time commitment and work that is in the program. But I would say that all of the alumni that I have talked to have said it is very, very well worth their time, and they would do it again. So we just actually finished our recruitment for cohort 3, which will begin in January, but we are slated to do another cohort that will start in September of 2020. So if you are interested, please let me know. We're always welcome to answer questions, to connect you with other people who have been through the program, to provide more information, and then to answer any questions about the application process as well. I won't take up too much time. If there's any brief questions, I can stick around for a few minutes, or like I said, my card and information is on the back. So thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jackie. So just a couple more housekeeping items before we get started. How many of you have purchased your tickets for the Small Business Success Summit yet? 1. If I had a gold star, I'd give it to you. I implore you, 2, perfect. I implore you, if you haven't done so, please consider checking out the Small Business Success Summit. It's Friday, November 8th at the FFA Enrichment Center at DMAC. We have 3 keynote speakers, including a presentation from Google. There will be 18 breakout sessions and 28 resource partners that are participating. There we go. It's only $79. And if you go about it by way of purchasing a table, which is for 8 guests, it's $550, which is even cheaper per person. So make sure you're doing that because that is coming up quickly and registration is filling up fast. So again, I did leave the flyer on your table for more information. You can also reach out to Christina Moffitt or myself if you have any questions regarding this summit. And then one more thing, just so you know, this is our last top 5 for this year. RFPs, I believe, will be getting ready to go out if they're for business topics for 2020. So more to come on that. I believe Christina probably will be following up with information on that. But to that, the reason why I say that is because also on your table, we have our Small Business Resource Hub. So all of the events, including Top 5s and First Fridays, if you've missed those are available for you to go back and to watch. For example, today's presentation, my goal is to get that up later this afternoon for you guys to be able to review that. So if you missed any or see any other topics that you may be interested in, again, I advise you to check out the Small Business Hub website. And again, that flyer is also on your table. So now, we're going to switch gears and introduce our speaker. Kurt Pearson is the founder of Compass Financial Services. He is a UNI grad, class of '83 with a BA in Communications and Business. 1997, he was accepted into the Greater Des Moines Leadership Institute. And Kurt's name may sound familiar to some of you because for the last 22 years or so, he appears regularly on KCCI providing sound advice. So we're very lucky to have him. So please give a nice warm welcome to Kurt Pearson.
Thank you. So our topic today is culture, and I have really enjoyed visiting with some of you prior to me standing up here to kind of get a sense of what you would hope to take away, and that will impact how I continue to kind of put the presentation together on the fly. I have several tools loaded up, and the first question, I guess, that I want to present to us is why even talk about culture? Why is it important? It's kind of become a little bit of a buzzword, I think. Sometimes there are synonyms attached to it. And as you probably know, if you read the blog post that I submitted, or if you kind of read the teaser for the presentation today, I have certain beliefs that culture is our competitive advantage as small business people. And that competitive advantage is rooted and grounded in the fact that a potential customer or client cannot go anywhere else in town and get our heart and our passion for what we do and or the product that we provide. They may be able to go, well, take my business for example. Someone can go anywhere and buy a mutual fund, right? But if they really want advice from the perspective of my eyes or from my heart and my passion of doing it for almost 30 years, they have to come and see me. And that is our competitive advantage. It's also what attracts a team. Because if the leader in the organization has a clear vision for what they are trying to create, it then becomes contagious. And others say, you know what, I think I share a lot of the same vision. Now, it won't ever be 100% because every individual is unique, right? But they have to share a big percentage of that vision. And that is what begins to make the culture a foundation. And that's when you know you have a heart in your organization. And that is a synonym that I absolutely love, a heart in the organization. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So a working definition for culture. I like this definition. It's about as good as it gets, I think, because one of the things that happens as you begin to talk about your culture is you begin to realize that sometimes there is not a vocabulary that adequately describes what is going on in your organization or what you're trying to create. And so we're going to talk about some tools that will help give you some vocabulary, hopefully, as you go back to your organizations or as you think about this particular topic. But look at this definition with me for a second. Culture is a summation of how people within an organization interact with each other and work together. One of the tools, I have several different tools I'll put in front of you, so if you're interested in the topic, you can perhaps explore them more. Daniel Coyle, best-selling author these days, put together a book called The Culture Code. I'll be referring to it on and off over the next several minutes. His website is especially helpful, and we are going to go right there now because there's a little culture quiz I want us to take together. And as we're taking this culture quiz, it'll all be on the screen. I want you to write down on your paper your response or answer to the questions. And then after that, if you're willing to share, we're going to talk about some of the adjectives that were either in the quiz or maybe some other adjectives that you will come up with that would actually describe your culture where it's at right now, or what you've observed about a recent place that you've worked. Or maybe to protect your current employer, you want to talk about a place that you used to work. I don't care. I'm not going to get that detailed or force your hand, but adjectives that would describe a culture that either intrigued you or a culture that you knew had a level of dysfunction or room for improvement, okay? Now this quiz is right out on his website, and so you can go there anytime, and it's a great way to actually begin the whole conversation about culture with your coworkers or with the leaders in your company. So question number 1, working here feels, I don't know if you can see that very well. Let me see if I can blow it up. Working here feels regimented, rote, or fun. I'm always going to choose the better of the 3 options, so we'll just go through it that way on the screen. Question number 2, sharing a new idea feels terrifying, intimidating, or exciting. We've all had coworkers like this lady right here, right? Always exciting. It's like you wonder what they take before they come to work. Next question. When our leaders screw up, they evade it, admit it, or own it. When there's a big problem, we blame, we bail, we bail, or we rally. Meetings, this is a good one. Meetings are deadly, dutiful, or dynamic. 4 more. When someone here acts like a jerk, we avoid, complain, or confront. When we disagree, we brawl, we dismiss, or we engage. When I need help, my group is absent. You ever felt like the guy drowned in there? The group is attentive, or the group is invaluable. Performance reviews are painful, routine, or helpful. Now, when you take this back at your workplace or in a different setting, you'll be able to get a basic adjective to describe your culture, and then it kind of goes on a little bit from there. We're not going to do that today. But you see how awesome that little quiz is? It begins to generate conversation. And if you have a workplace that is open to working on their culture, that quiz, in my opinion, could be a great place to start, because the different vignettes are a bit humorous, and it will get everyone talking. So I'm hoping that it will get you talking, and I can write down some of the adjectives here. So either some of the adjectives that you saw on the quiz, or some other adjectives that you would use to describe a current culture or a past culture of where you worked. Shout them out good and loud. Fun? Intimidating? Challenging? Good. What else? Engaging. Dynamic. A couple more. Rewarding. One. What's that? Open. Those are good words. Do you see what that begins to do? It gets you thinking about cultures, what you liked, what you struggled with, and the places that you worked. What is the ultimate goal with a culture?
Every individual to bring 100% of them every single day to work to perform their best.
Oh, excellent. Say it again, good and loud. Yeah.
Allow 100% of individuals to bring 100% of them every single day.
Yes. For every individual to bring 100% of themselves to work every day. Someone said engaging, a culture that's engaging. That is the definition of engagement. Are we going to be engaged if the culture is defined by everyone wondering what kind of mood the boss will be in that day? No, because that creates a whole level of energy and focus and attention that isn't about performing, producing, and being creative, right? So that's what a culture is. Let's move on and talk about how we build a culture, because that was a consistent theme throughout the previous conversations. So we already talked a little bit about how a culture is the heart of the organization. I believe strongly that the culture begins in the hearts of the individual. There are two questions that we ask regularly, and I'll write them down as I say them so you can write them down. They're real easy. Question number one, who am I? And question number two, what am I called to create? Now, why are those two questions part of a culture? I decided a long time ago that when I was involved in a career, I did not want to go through the motions. I observed in a previous culture before I started my financial practice that there were several individuals who went through the motions. My contention is life is too short. We spend an incredible percentage of our time at work between the ages of 23 to 65. Why not invest that time into something that we believe in? Something that is consistent with who we are as a person. I think it's crucial. And so if I was beginning a business from scratch, I would begin by asking this question of myself and anyone that would come alongside to join up. Who am I? Well, if you take the question deeper, you begin to realize it's a question that we never fully answer during our journey here. That's another thing I like. Business is all about defining, hitting profit margin, hitting our numbers. And that's good. We all want to stay in business, so we have to pay attention to that. But over time, you begin to realize there's more to life than hitting a number. And you have to bring a bigger perspective into the mix. Continually asking the question, who am I? If you're struggling with the question, one place that you can begin is by using your role definitions in life. That's an easy way to begin with that question. Who am I? Well, I'm a leader of a company. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, the roles in life, right? And those roles change significantly as we travel through life. Well, as we begin to get a foundation and an answer in some sort to that first question, who am I? Then we move on to the question of what am I called to create? And that's where it really gets exciting, because this is at the heart of the culture. What are we called to create? I believe every individual is an artist. And in their lifetime, they are called to create something to leave the world significantly better than when they started. What is that something? And can that be done in your current workplace? Is your company even thinking that large? What are we called to create here? That, in my opinion, keeps us on the edge and keeps our work incredibly exciting. As you begin to unfold and unravel those questions and begin to dig into them a little bit more, a perspective begins to emerge as to how the relationships need to be organized in the business to make the creation happen. So that's one of the first steps, asking the big questions of the leadership in particular, and letting those questions begin to penetrate and permeate through the organization. Now, if you're in a workplace currently that hasn't asked some of those large questions, that's okay. And it may really be a jolt and a shock if you walk into the next meeting and you look at someone and say, who are you? Right? So you may have to ease into it a little bit. And there are ways to do that. Daniel Coyle, in his book, The Culture Code, talks about one of the first steps to going down the culture path is to begin sharing vulnerability. And so if you want an honest takeaway, wherever you find yourself in the organization, if you're mid-level, upper level, whatever, that is an excellent way to begin building culture, because the vulnerability comes about when the leader of the company meets with another person in the company and says, hey, I want to get better at my job. Can you tell me what I'm doing well as a leader and what I need to work on? And assuming that that question comes from a very honest place, you all of a sudden have a level of vulnerability. That's a really good place to begin building a culture. Daniel Coyle's second point in his book is about building safety in the organization. Building a safe place. So think about that. Think about those two items and kind of hold them loose along with those two questions. Who am I? What am I called to create? And you have a safe place and a place where vulnerability is openly shared. All of a sudden, you have a place where there is connection beginning to happen in relationships. Where there is connection and honesty in relationships, now you have creativity emerging, you have collaboration, you have teams working together that can move the ball forward. And that is exciting. Sports teams talk about it in terms of the locker room. You know, we're knee deep into football season, right? What's the attitude of the locker room? Some locker rooms are healthy. They figured out some of the answers to the quiz questions that we took, right? Other locker rooms are not. Makes a huge difference in how the team pulls together and handles adversity, handles success. Makes a huge difference. So another key component is from this book, The Ideal Team Player. Let me shift screens here. Many of you have probably heard of Patrick Lencioni. His classic work, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, right? Very good book. One of his latest works is called The Ideal Team Player. So when it comes to recruiting and retaining team members with an eye on culture, are they contributing to our culture? Are they detracting from our culture? How can we keep things consistent and running on the rails once we have our culture defined, right? He identifies 3 characteristics of ideal team players. And you can kind of see it up here on the screen. I'll try to blow it up just a little bit more. Characteristic number 1 is humility. Characteristic number 2 is people smarts. And characteristic number 3 is a hunger to grow the business. Dovetails very well with what we've already talked about, vulnerability and building safety. Humility is one of the key components to those ideas. Well, he takes it the next step and says, well, you know what? It's not the only component, because if you have someone that's incredibly humble, and that is the overriding characteristic in their teamwork, they become a pawn, and they just won't stand up for what they believe. That's not what you want. Creative ideas need to be shared openly, and perspectives and opinions need to be shared openly, right? Well, you have someone that's really hungry to grow their business but doesn't have a lot of people smarts or humility. They become a bulldozer. Those with people smarts and without the other 2 are charmers. Again, you take these kinds of ideas back to your team and you'll begin to say, hey, I think I know somebody like that, right? It's a great book because he talks about what kinds of questions to ask in an interview setting to try to pick up on where a person is at with these 3 characteristics of an ideal team player. Great resource and very interesting resource. So you have a team already in place, of course, and you begin to read through a book like this and you begin to realize, okay, we got some issues to talk about. Then you're in the mode of having the fierce conversations, and that's a whole nother topic for another day. Maybe I'll submit that on the RFP, Michael, for next year, right? But those fierce conversations are very important because I will maintain that a leader's main job in an organization is to protect the culture. If you have a leader that is not protecting the culture, you have an organization that is not safe. And where there isn't safety, it's like an opening then for dysfunction to begin to take hold. Now, if you're in an organization where the leader is not about protecting the culture, you have a decision to make. You can work really hard at defining and implementing a culture right in your work team and see how that goes. Do your best, right? Or if you have a leader that is at least open-minded about change and refining their skills, give them my number and have them come see me. I'll try to convince them for you. No, it's really difficult when the leadership in an organization doesn't see their job as protecting the culture. That is the main job of a leader in any organization, in my opinion. Well, the third resource that I want to spend a couple minutes on is a book that's a bit dated, but it's had a significant impact on us, and it's Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. Chapter 5, in particular, the Hedgehog Concept. You may be familiar with it. A bit of a background on the book. The book Good to Great was put together by Jim Collins and a team of researchers who looked at companies that had an incredible spike, up move in their share price at one point. And what they discovered is that that spike in the share price and in the valuation of their company didn't just happen because of one single event. It was a building of momentum over a number of years and years. One of the things that they found in going into these organizations is some of them had the typical mission statement on the wall. But more often than not, the culture was defined internally, and everyone knew what the culture was, and everyone knew how to live it out. It wasn't something on the wall. And maybe you're picking up on that through my presentation. You know, so many times we sit at a retreat and we come up with our mission statement. I'm not against that kind of work. It can be very productive. But how much more productive could it be when we figure out more about each individual team member through the questions, who am I? What am I called to create? And we begin building something from the inside out rather than starting with something that's on the outside and trying to get that into people. You see the difference? Totally different way of building culture. Anyway, Jim Collins and the research team learned all of these details about the cultures of these good to great companies. And they began to organize them in the form of a Venn diagram, 3 circles overlapping. And the center, if you draw a little tail on it and a couple eyes, looks like a hedgehog. Well, the first circle is, what are we passionate about? And down to all of the good to great companies knew exactly what their passion was. The second circle, what do we want to be best in the world at? And this often did not include their core competence. It was something bigger than that. The third circle was an economic circle. And there was usually a ratio, 1 times X. What's our most profitable activity in the company, and how do we measure our efficiency with that activity? And then the center was the hedgehog. Well, in 2004, we needed to do some work on culture as we began to build the team in my company. And we began, unbeknownst to those who were on the team at the time, we began about a 4-year journey. And that's what Jim Collins estimates that it takes to work on this kind of thing and to bring effective change. It's a long path, 4 or 5 years. And we would talk about it consistently every week in our meeting. Then we'd take a break from it for a while, and then we'd come back to it. Well, what we landed on is right here. And this is the final draft, if you will. We had several drafts before this that were more complicated. We knew it needed to be simple. And so our culture is defined by this Venn diagram. Our passion, we are passionate about the value of people. Each individual, just as they are. That has an impact in how we treat each other on our team, has an impact on how we treat a client, an outside vendor. Doesn't matter. The value of person is our passion. We want to be best in the world at listening. That's a discipline that is very difficult, but it's very important, and it begins with listening to ourselves. And we already have our 2 questions, right? Who am I? What am I called to create? We listen into those. And it's so exciting for me when a team member comes to our Monday morning meeting and says, you know what? Guess what I heard over the weekend? And they have a new revelation to share with the entire team about something they learned about themselves. Sometimes they learned that because a family member wasn't afraid to share honestly. Yeah, it's good stuff. Our economic driver is about being profitable, but not profit-driven. And then our hedgehog, we want to be about creating a safe place. We think exciting things can happen in our work team, in our interactions with our clients, if we live out what we have on the page here. Now, when you get your culture to this level, the other exciting piece is you begin to sift decisions through those 3 circles. Let me give you one example. It's very common in my business, the financial advising business, for firms to have client minimums. Do you know what I'm talking about? You have to have $500,000 of investable assets, or we can't work with you. At Compass, because of our culture, we have no client minimums. Now, sometimes that really doesn't help our profit. But we believe, long term, we have to be true to who we are. Question?
It's actually very interesting that you have that particular one to be profitable but not profit-driven. I'm just curious about your journey in coming to that particular one, because as business owners, I'm not a business owner, but as business owners, I like to think, well, we have to be profits. That's your bottom line. If you don't have profits, you don't exist. So can you share a little bit about your journey to coming to that one and what does it actually mean?
Yes, I can. The question is, how did we arrive at the economic circle, be profitable but not profit-driven? I think it's hard to, you know how I said earlier that sometimes it's really difficult to put these, to give vocabulary to these things? That's our best attempt. We get our books done every month. We know what our profit margin is. We're paying attention to it. But there is a voice in our industry that I just alluded to that would say, hey, you know what? You can really focus your efforts and give great customer service if you limit your clients to those who have $500,000 of assets or more. That's when, yeah, they may be right. But as we look at the economic circle, we may say, man, that decision would make tons of sense. But oh, wait a minute. How does that fit with our other 2? Not very well. So that's a pretty good, simple example of how you have to sift it through all 3. And then, you know, it's common on our work team that when someone is poking fun at another team member, someone will say, safe place, safe place. It becomes kind of a throwback, you know. And yeah, that's all good. Now, if it was happening regularly, they'd have to work on some things, but it becomes kind of a, that's when things have become internalized, I guess is a good way to say it. And the entire team is engaged in moving the culture forward. And that's what you want. You don't want one person, the leader of the company, to be the only one that's engaged with the culture. Then you don't really have a culture. That's good. I think we're getting down to about 12:40 or so. Is that right? So I'll tell you, I'd like to wrap up with a short video, and then we'll leave a little bit more time for other questions. Unless there is a question now someone has. So 3 resources, Good to Great, Chapter 5, the Hedgehog Concept. The entire book is really good. The Ideal Team Player, if you want to talk about those 3 characteristics and begin to figure out how your team stacks up. And then Daniel Coyle in a short video that we're going to watch to wrap up from him, talking about build safety, share vulnerability, and tell your story and watch what purpose comes out of it. Now, that's a good point I guess I'll comment on before the video. So a mission begins to emerge when you do the inside work on your culture. See how different that is than the other way around? The other way around is, hey, let's retreat and let's come up with a mission statement that we can put on the wall and hope it begins to permeate. No, start inside. It's going to take longer and it's going to be more intense work. But when you start inside, then the culture can begin to take shape and a mission begins to emerge. It's kind of the concept from Jim Collins' book on first who, then what. You know what they discovered from the good to great companies? Is whenever they had a merger or an acquisition, they didn't come in and fire everyone from one company. They merged even though they didn't have a significant job description or role available for someone that had incredible talent. They kept that person because they knew they were right for the culture. And then guess what? An opportunity came along, and that person is what moved the ball forward for that company. So this is an inside-out approach that I feel very strong about. It's not easy, and it takes time, but it's worthwhile. And it really is what adds value to the company over a long period of time. Let's watch Daniel Coyle wrap us up here, and then I'll take any questions. Oh, there are my grandkids. This is about 6 minutes.
I'm 10 years old, and I'm focused on a really simple question, actually obsessed with a question. How do I get really, 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 really good at baseball, good enough to play for, I had thoughtfully narrowed it down to 2 teams. The St. Louis Cardinals, because they won all the time, and the Cleveland Indians, because they never won. I kept striking out when I got to the high school age. I couldn't play that well, and so I decided, I made a decision. If I couldn't be a great performer, I would study great performers. I grew up to be a journalist and a researcher. And my job essentially is to travel the world and look at great performers and see what makes them tick. Look at the science of great performance. I married a girl from Ohio and moved to Cleveland about 10 years ago, and one day my telephone rang. And it was the Cleveland Indians. They finally called. And they were in a bad spot. They had one of the worst records in baseball the last 5 years, and they were looking to bring in new ideas. And they had read some of my work, and they said, we want to bring you in. And one thing led to another, and I took a position as an advisor to the Cleveland Indians. And then something even more surprising happened. Cleveland started winning. For the last 5 years, we have the best record in the American League. We have spent $400 million less than our rivals. We're a small market team that is adding up to more than the sum of our parts. Being on the front lines and watching that rocket ship take off, watching that transformation sent me on a journey to go around the world and look at great groups. high-performing groups, groups like Pixar, groups like Navy SEAL Team 6. What is culture? How do we get better at culture? Well, you want to have values. You want to have leadership. You want to have trust. You want to have teamwork and integrity and mission and purpose and honesty and integrity and cohesion. All this is in fact true, but it's useless as a tool. It's not a good tool. Culture is by far the most important force in our community, in our families, in our organizations, and our way of thinking about it is medieval. So I want to give you a new way of thinking about this space, and it starts with a group that maybe you've already known. Maybe you've already met this group. These are starlings, but this actually captures what it's like to watch a Navy SEAL team on a mission. This actually embodies what it's like to watch Pixar make a movie. This embodies what good groups do. They move at speed, information flowing through the entire group, solving problems in real time. And the funny thing is, starlings have brains as big as a grain of rice. They're not paying attention to values or mission or purpose. What they are doing instead is doing the thing that all good groups do. They're paying keen attention to signals of connection. They're paying keen attention to signals that share information with each other. They're sharing accurate information and signals of direction. You are not so different. There's a deep human grammar of connection that we all are connected to. It's a language. It's a language not of words, but of signals. Signals that connect us, signals through which we share information, and signals through which we determine direction. This is the model for thinking about this space of culture. How do human beings connect? Well, we connect through safety. We build safety. When we get a signal of safety, we connect. How do we share information? How do we share accurate information in groups? We share vulnerability. We open up to each other and tell each other the truth. How do we determine direction? How do humans determine what direction their group should go, whether that group is a family, a sports team, an organization, or a community? It's a story. That story tells us what direction to go. This is a functional map of how culture works. There's a moment in group life where connection either happens or it doesn't. You're in a group, everyone's excited about a project, and people buy in. We call that buy-in, because people are literally investing in the group, feeling connected. And we know what that feeling feels like. It's a wonderful feeling. Sometimes it happens in a fake way. People seem bought in, but then push comes to shove, and they're not quite bought in. They're not quite there. It's a really mysterious moment in group life. What makes people feel that connection in their guts? There's a man named Peter Skillman, who's an engineer, who dug into this question. And the way he decided to explore that question was through a contest. Simple contest. It was who could build the tallest tower with the following materials: 20 pieces of raw spaghetti, a yard of tape, and a single standard-sized marshmallow. Only rule, marshmallow goes on top. He had teams of 4, teams of CEOs, teams of lawyers, teams of MBAs, and teams of kindergartners. Ready, set, go. And all the adult groups start the same way. They circle up and they begin to talk. They make a plan. And then they improve on that plan. They have more talking. They improve on that plan. Then they divide up in roles, and then they start to build. And it looks gorgeous. It looks smooth. It looks cooperative. It looks like the embodiment of perfect human cooperation. The kindergartners, not so much. They basically start eating a lot of marshmallows. And then they haphazardly start jamming stuff together and taping, and it looks like complete chaos. And if you had to bet your life savings which group would win, most of us would pick an adult group. No question. Because that's the way our mental model of group performance works. Our mental model focuses on what we can see. And what we see, when we see intelligent, cooperative, experienced individuals working together, we assume they will combine into an intelligent group. When we see chaotic children jamming things together, we assume it is going to be a chaotic group. There's tower height in inches. There are the MBAs. Nobody was going to bet on them anyway. There are the lawyers. They do a bit better. There are the CEOs, do a bit better, but nobody touches the kindergartners. They win every time, and it's not even close. And it seems like an optical illusion. And it's because our mental model does not take into account the 2 most important factors of group performance: status management and safety. The adults look like they're cooperating. In fact, they are managing status with each other. While they're talking, there's a whisper in the back of their heads. Who's in charge here? Where do I fit in? Is it okay to say that? The kindergartners work together, and because they work faster and because they don't care and they're not worried about who is in charge, they're able to iterate, ideate, and innovate more rapidly. What gives you better feedback than your tower falling down? Perfect feedback. How to fix it? Let's fix it together. Safety is not just some atmospheric feeling. It is the core of good group performance. It is by far the most important factor. It makes you smarter. That moment of connection.
Related back to what I said, one of my main premises, knowing who we are. The adult groups that built the towers were all concerned about who someone else is and comparing, how do I stack up? That's a measuring stick that leads us awry every time. Who am I? Who was I created to be? That is the core of building a good culture. Maybe I like him because he proved my point. I don't know. Questions? I don't know if I have any answers, but maybe we can work on the questions together.
Is there an example, and you don't have to say a specific company name, maybe it's an industry, maybe it's a generic description, where you've seen either great success or great failure that you could talk about to wrap around the culture impact?
So the question is, are there examples of companies that the culture is really working, right? There are several examples. I mean, many examples that all of us would know. Apple is one example. You know, their culture is very defined. And if you are a Microsoft guy, you may not be fitting into their culture. If you need your Apple product worked on, you make an appointment at the Genius Bar. Microsoft doesn't have geniuses as far as I know, right? They do it differently. So you look for little signals of those kinds of cultures. How about Harley Davidson? Now, they're an interesting example because they are going through a bit of an identity crisis. Baby boomers are not buying bikes like they used to. Harley Davidson is trying to figure out how to formulate a product that will appeal to millennials. And it's going to be interesting to see what they come up with. I think they've already got a couple of prototypes out there. Those are a couple that come right to my mind.
Thank you.
Yep. Guy.
Does it become all about hiring for a culture, or can you change culture?
Very good question. So, especially from the standpoint of the merger and acquisition idea, when two cultures try to come together, and I have yet to hear of a major success story when there was a merger or an acquisition where the new organization didn't take 2 or 3 steps back before they got things leveled out and started to go forward. So changing a culture is very difficult, especially if you do not have the leader on board and the leader is really serious about the conversations. It can be done, but it really needs to start from the inside and at the top. That's my perspective. Okay, no more questions? One more thing I'd like for you to do. On your paper, or maybe take out a fresh sheet of paper, I'd like for you to commit to a couple of things that you would do in the next week related to what you've heard this morning or this afternoon. So you say, well, I don't know if I can affect that much change in my organization. Okay, then start in your circle. Your family has a culture. You have a connection with friends. How will you go down the path? It takes a lot of courage, but how will you go down the path of sharing vulnerability in your relationships? Maybe that's your one idea. If any of you are parents to teenagers, I found that it was very insightful when I didn't do this very often, and you'll know why, but I thought it was very insightful when I would ask one of my teenagers, hey, what do you think about the job I'm doing as a dad? They had ideas, you know? That's beginning. It's a little step, or perhaps it's a big step for some of us, but that's what I'm talking about. Take away something from our time together that you'd say, hey, within the next week, I'm going to do something. Maybe it's telling your boss that he needs to watch the replay of this session. I don't know. All right, I think we're out of time.
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes? Any other last minute questions? Oh, I wanted to come back. A couple had a comment about gender in their workplace. So that's a very interesting point. I really liked the starlings. We've all seen that, right? Are the starlings boys or girls? I don't know. My point is, guys tend to like this hierarchy thing. Ladies tend to like the connection. And there is a movement when it comes to culture that is about removing hierarchy from an organization. Well, how do I get a performance review then if no one is my boss, quote unquote? Well, I'll tell you how. In these organizations, the team member who thinks they deserve a raise comes in front of the team. Hey, I'm proposing a 10% raise for me, and here's why. And the team gives them feedback. I find it very fascinating to keep flattening out our organizations and the impact that has on gender influence, I'll call it, in the workplace. It's a very interesting topic to me right now. I think the future is about flat organizations that operate like the starlings. Because if we know who we are, it's an amazing thought. It's a big thought to leave you with. Thanks for coming out for lunch.
All right, Kurt, thank you once again for presenting today. Again, one more friendly reminder. If you have not signed up to register for the upcoming Small Business Summit on November 8th, I would advise you to go to our website and do so today. Again, seats and tables are filling up fast, and the value that you get is way, way more than the price you pay for admission. So again, I encourage you to do that if you have not. Any other questions regarding future top fives or events like that, you can direct them to Christina. If you have feedback from today's event, you can also shoot Christina or myself a general email. You can find her information on the Small Businesses Hub on our Small Business Resources Hub on our website. Just go to dsmpartnership.com. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed lunch, enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you guys have a great afternoon. Thank you for coming.